Mr. Constantine, I'd like to ask you a few questions.
Roger Ebert wasn't shy about calling out a bad movie when he saw one, and when it came to horror, he didn't hold back. While he appreciated the genre when it was done right, there were a few horror films that left him shaking his head in disbelief. Here are some of the worst horror movies of all time, according to Roger Ebert. Roger hated the hell out of the 2001 remake of William Castle's gimmicky film from 1960. He called the experience literally painful, as he felt the film hurt his eyes and ears because of how loud it was, how excessive the strobe effects were, and how badly edited it ended up being. It's the story of a group of people who find themselves heading over to a house where there are entrapped ghosts. Care to guess how many? Ben is the sequel to 1971's Willard, making it the second-best killer rat film made by Bing Crosby Productions. There's really nothing here to enjoy even accidentally, and the film doesn't reach the heights of other small-budget B-movie horror films of the 1970s. After 90 minutes of rubber rats being thrown at people, we finally get something worthwhile: Michael Jackson's original song for the film. The song not only turned out to be Jackson's personal favorite song, but Ben was nominated for an Oscar for Best Original Song. How can anyone hate Keanu Reeves? For Ebert, it took this underwhelming DC Comics film about a supernatural demonologist investigating a suicide with supernatural elements. Constantine isn't a terrible film, but it is so in love with its own special effects that it relies on them to make up for an underperforming script, and unfortunately by now they're pretty outdated. At no point does the film really give you a sense of dread. To call Critters 2 the main course, a Gremlins ripoff is perhaps giving it too much credit. This follow-up to the 1986 horror comedy about furry little aliens that feast on a small town is a painful rehash that isn't even B-movie good. Still, the film somehow has its fans, who manage to appreciate the schlockiness and enjoy it for what it is. Ebert, however, said it best when he accurately described it as suffering from a bankruptcy of imagination. Even though it's incessantly stupid, The Deathmaster will teach you a valuable life lesson: never mess with a coffin that washes up on the beach. That happens in the first 3 minutes of the film, kicking off 84 minutes of irritating idiocy. The dialogue is grating, the editing incoherent, and the story plods along with very little vampire action until the very end. Ebert describes the actors' dialogue by saying, "They talk like Frankie Avalon trying to pass for hip." In 1972, that was an insult that cut deep.
You're not in it. Not in the mirror.
Look!
Deep Rising seems to fancy itself a high-concept horror movie, but the only thing that's high here is the film executive who greenlighted this mess. The film follows a group of criminals who hope to hijack a cruise liner, only to be beaten to the punch by a squid-like undersea creature. CGI monster mayhem ensues. Ebert lamented, bemusing how much money and effort go into the making of such a movie, and how little thought. The Devil's Reign is a movie about Satan worshippers that's so inept and brainless that the devil himself should sue the filmmakers for defamation. The film has one of the best casts for a bad film in movie history, including Captain Kirk himself, William Shatner, fighting evil. All of this would be good, silly fun if the movie weren't so painfully dull, Ebert pointed out in his review. When Roger reviewed The Guardian in 1990, he didn't bother writing a lot about it. Perhaps he felt the same disappointment audiences felt, as the film was directed by none other than William Friedkin, the filmmaker responsible for making one of the greatest horror films ever made, The Exorcist. Ebert made fun of the film's ridiculous premise about a mythological being trying to snatch a kid from a wealthy family, and actually admitted some special effects were okay. Today, Friedkin has entirely disowned the film. Halloween. Season of the Witch will forever be cursed as the Halloween film without Michael Myers. It's a movie about cursed masks and killing a bunch of kids on Halloween or something. The plot is an excuse for some not-so-inventive kills. Ebert complained that this is one of those identikit movies, assembled out of familiar parts from other, better movies. Still, it has its fans, who insist the film is better than you remember and should be revisited and judged on its own merits. 1987's Hellraiser from horror master Clive Barker was a genuinely creepy original horror film. It was an unexpected hit, So the following year, New World Pictures brought us Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, which got rid of all those good memories from the year before. The film thinks that throwing more gore and envelope-pushing violence will make it work. It doesn't. Ebert called it an ideal movie for audiences with little taste. Roger vocally hated revenge film I Spit on Your Grave. He addressed it as a vile bag of garbage that was only made to make money and without intention to display something artistic. In his review, you can feel nothing but anger at the experience of watching the film in theaters. The truth is, I Spit on Your Grave is a terrible feature film that has no reason to exist and can only satisfy moviegoers that attend the cinema for the sake of watching fictional violence take place. Ebert called Jaws the Revenge. Not simply a bad movie, but also a stupid and incompetent one. He was absolutely right. The fourth entry in the Jaws franchise is a moronic film about Chief Brody's wife Ellen having some sort of telepathic connection to events she didn't live through, and a white shark set on avenging the events of the past. The more you see this one, the more ridiculous stuff you will find in it. Why can't Hollywood get Resident Evil right? The adaptation of the hit video game series almost worked in this film, largely because of Mila Jovovich's performance as Alice. Instead of embracing the natural horror inherent in a zombie film, Resident Evil goes heavy on the conspiracy theory angle, because that's what people apparently wanted to see in a zombie movie. Ebert in particular took issue with the not-so-impressive zombies, stating they walk with the lurching shuffle of a drunk. It's hard not to agree with Roger's take on Resident Evil Apocalypse, the direct sequel to the first film. He called it an utterly meaningless waste of time, and saying there was no reason to produce it except to make money, and there is no reason to see it except to spend money. His review consists mostly of questions that take the film's logic and mashes it into oblivion. The 2004 film follows a settlement of pilgrim-like settlers in Pennsylvania terrorized by creatures in the surrounding woods. William Hurt, Joaquin Phoenix, Adrian Brody, and Sigourney Weaver try their best, but the problem with the film is that the payoff ruins a perfectly good build-up. Ebert himself said the ending is so witless, in fact, that when we do discover the secret, we want to rewind the film, so we don't know the secret anymore.
Close the door! He'll come back to make sure we're safe. Ivy! Ivy, please!